Hello, you all. Welcome into this word. It's so interesting because I actually wanted to come on and talk to you all about this specific message a couple of days ago, but I've just been feeling kind of under the weather. I feel a little bit better now. But I wanted to talk to you all about your potential, that word. I want to talk to you all about your potential and how it's already within you and how you can pull it out of you, or better yet, how you can allow God to pull it out of you. Because the thing is, when you really think about it, there are so many of you who have this, you have this vision or this desire, that's a better word. You have this desire that God has placed in your heart, and you know that that desire is from God. You know that desire is pure, and you're just trying to make your way to that, but it just feels out of reach. It just feels like it's just like you understand that it could definitely be yours, but it just feels a little bit out of reach. And every time you get closer, you just feel like it's just a little bit more out of reach. And the thing is it feels like that because little by little, you're tapping into your potential, or better yet, little by little, God is pulling that potential out of you, and it's a maturing journey. This is why I have the Promised Land Mentorship, because I take people through this maturing journey. It's not just a one and done thing. It's a process, it's a journey. And so the thing is that it's very unfortunate, but we all are born. Well, okay, let me backtrack. It's not unfortunate that we all are born, but it is. Okay, let me phrase it this way. We all are born with a certain measure of potential within us, but what is unfortunate is that not everyone reaches their fullest potential. So there are a lot of people who unfortunately pass away with their potential and the desires that God placed in their heart just laying dormant, just not ever reaching it. It's just always been out of reach, and it's just been laying dormant. But the thing is that God desires throughout your lifetime to pull on that potential, and you've got to allow him to do that. And it's a very uncomfortable process. I want to take you to Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5, one of my favorite scriptures. It says, this is the Lord talking about Jeremiah. He says, before I created you in the womb, I knew you. So that's him saying that he created Jeremiah in the womb. Was it just Jeremiah? No, the Lord created you in your mother's womb. The Lord created me in my mother's womb, and he knew all of us. And he didn't just know major things. He knew the very tiny details about you, and it's not just physical appearance. I'm going to go a little bit deeper on you all here. He knew the very tiny details about you when it comes to what makes up your character and what makes up your personality. It's all woven in the womb. The Lord literally formed you in your mother's womb. Now, I want to go, like I said, a little bit deeper. That doesn't just mean that he formed your body. It doesn't just mean that he formed your flesh. It means that he formed your spirit. It means that he breathed the breath of life in you in your mother's womb. He formed your spirit, meaning he literally put his light, which is your spirit, in your mother's womb. So I'm going to hold on to that because I'm going to dig into that a little bit later. I'm going to try to remember. But the thing is that when he did that, the potential was already there. He already put the potential in you to become everything that he said that you should be. He spoke a word over you. Going down, he said, before I created you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. He's talking about Jeremiah. He said, I made you a prophet to the nations. So the same thing for you. When the Lord had formed your spirit, including your flesh, in your mother's womb, he knew you and he set you apart to be something. He placed a certain measure of potential in you, and it's up to you to allow God throughout your lifetime to pull on that potential and to literally pull it out of you. It's a very uncomfortable process, like I was saying. Going back to your spirit, when you're born, immediately we're born into the world and we're born into this flesh. We don't understand that our spirit is separate from our actual flesh. And so what happens is we begin to take on the things that the world says that we should be. We begin to take on titles. We begin to take on positions. We begin to take on all of this programming that the world says that we are. But that's not who you really are. I've done tons of messages. At this point, I'm going to probably do a playlist on it. I've done tons of messages on your identity and who you really are in God, because once you understand who God is to the core, and we can never really, really deeply understand God. He's just that magnificent. But once you really begin to know him on a deep spiritual soul level, then you begin to know yourself. He begins to show you, not just what you look like on the outside, but he begins to show you your spirit, the real you who's listening to your thoughts, because your thoughts is just your mind, right? Your thoughts is just, it's just programming that was placed in you from when you were a child, or when you worked a certain job, or when you had certain friends, or certain traumatic events that have happened in your life. But the thing is your spirit is listening to those thoughts. This is why the Word of God tells us to take captive every thought and submit it to God, right? Every thought that exalts itself above the knowledge of God. I remember I was reading a comment a couple of weeks ago, and someone said, how do you do that? How do you take captive thoughts? What does that actually mean? That means that whenever a thought comes up and it's negative, it's not something that it's something that goes directly against your spirit, right? The you that God formed in your mother's womb. It's something that goes against your identity, the real you. You're going to experience double-mindedness. You're going to experience anxiety. There's going to be some friction there. You have to take that thought and immediately capture it. And it's going to take some time to learn how to do this on the spot. You have to take that thought, capture it, and say, is this true? Is this actually true about me? Is this actually what the Word of God says about me? Is this actually who God said that I am? Is it true? You can't just let every thought that comes into your mind just run rampant, because it will start to tunnel, and immediately, you can end up somewhere else. This is how people end up in depression. This is how people end up going through anxiety attacks. This is how people end up, committing suicide. I've done many prayers against the spirit of suicide, but this is how things begin to spiral. So you have to literally capture it in the moment and submit it to what the Word of God says about you, who you truly are in God. Every thought that comes into your mind is not your own thought. Your spirit is listening to those thoughts. And immediately when you come into agreement with it, you are saying, I want this thing to be made manifest in my life. Amos chapter 3, verse 3, can two walk together except they be agreed? So if you're thinking something that maybe you heard on TV, maybe you heard in a song, maybe it's a spirit that has literally spoken this into your ear. It's a familiar spirit, it's a false prophet, whatever it may be, and it's not true, and you come into agreement thinking that's your own thought, immediately Amos chapter 3, verse 3 comes into effect, and that thing starts to be made manifest in your life. So you have to capture those thoughts. That's what it means. And to answer that question, someone had asked that a while ago. So the thing is that when God formed you in your mother's womb, He formed your spirit in your mother's womb, and He placed your spirit inside of flesh. This is what we've seen happen in the book of Genesis when God made Adam, where He had said that He created Adam out of the dust. He created man out of the dust of the earth, and then He breathed the breath of life into Adam. He breathed the breath of God into Adam. He put literally a spirit into Adam. The same thing happened to you. When that happened, back in the book of Genesis, He gave Adam... He spoke a word over Adam. He gave him all of his potential, right? But did Adam reach his fullest potential? Absolutely not. There are many, many instances where we see that happening, but then there are also many instances where we do see where there are people throughout biblical history who have reached like a lot of their potential that God has placed within them. We've seen this happen with David. He could have easily stayed a shepherd's boy, but he rose all the way to becoming king. We've seen where many times, even Esther, she could have stayed an orphanage. She could have stayed an orphan. But she had rose to a big chunk, probably her fullest potential. She became all the way up to queen. We've seen this same thing happen with Ruth. She could have stayed in Moab. She could have went with Orpah, but she decided to allow God to pull at her potential and what was possible for her. So how do you actually do this? And this is what I want you to hold on to. I'm going to try to create another message that's a little bit more in depth on this. How do you actually allow God to pull at your potential so that you can step into that thing that you think is just out of reach? It's always out of reach. You have to allow your spirit man to be in control of what is going on in your life 99.9% of the time. You have to constantly put your spirit back in control, because when your spirit isn't in control, it's cutting off your communication with God. Your spirit is the you that has the real communication with God. Your spirit is the one that's able to hear from God, right? Your spirit is the one that's able to guide you into everything that God has for you. And it doesn't mean, I want to be very specific here, that doesn't mean that you are God, because there's some people who say, because we have spirits, we are God. You're not God. No, that doesn't mean you are God. It means that your spirit has direct communication with God. But if your spirit man isn't in control and you're not allowing your spirit to lead you because your spirit connects with God, then what is in control? It is your mind. It is your ego. It is your soul, which is the mind, the will, and the emotions. If you're operating in life and doing everything from a soulish place, a fleshly place, it's always, the desires that God has placed in your heart, it's always going to feel just out of reach. So how do you put your spirit back in control? Many people they don't want to meditate. And there's a specific way that you do this. You meditate on the word of God. You allow God to minister to you. You allow God to pour into you. You fast. The word of God says that we have to fast and pray. So there's fasting and there's meditating. That's how you can do it. Also, I have many exercises, and there's many things that I take you all through, and I break down a lot of really wonderful things in depth inside the Promised Land Mentorship. So I encourage you to join that. But it's a journey, it's a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not something that will even happen sometimes in a couple of months. It's a journey and it's work. Because the thing is from the day that we're born up until now, we all have been through a lot. We all have been through a lot of things in our lifetime. And these things have shaped us and formed us, and it's imprinted things on our brain. And so when we respond to people, we're not responding, we're not moving throughout life from a place of just truly being grounded in our spirit and being able to take direct guidance and instructions from God, but instead we're reacting based off of old trauma wounds. We're reacting based off of old things that have happened in our childhood, in our past, and old relationships and old job environments and just old things, right? It's coming from a place of reacting instead of from a place of just being fully grounded in who God has created you to be. This is why your identity is so important. This is why it's so important to really just step into who it is that God has called you to be. So I love you all. I pray that this blessed some of you. I know that it's not for everyone, and I do believe that this will bless a lot of you. I encourage you all to join the Promised Land Mentorship. It is a 12-month journey. It's absolutely beautiful. I highly encourage you all to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you are not already. It's just going to ensure that you're not missing out on anything as these messages continue to go out. And I love you all. Make sure you share this. I'll talk with you in the next message.